And now, on This Week in History with Paul Waite.
I am Paul Waite, and it is on This Week in History, the week ending April the 11th, I suppose, really.
Lovely, jubbly.
Again, not masses of facts, but enough, I think, and some interesting ones. And, of course, on This Week in History for the last 2 weeks has been the Grand National over, 170 times now, whatever it is. So, an interesting one today. One of the great kings, certainly great warfaring kings, anyway, and maybe someone who is almost the quintessence of being English, Henry V.
Ah, yes.
Now, I don't expect you to know this. Any idea who was the father of Henry V?
That's probably my worst area of history, to be honest.
So, Henry V's father was imaginatively called Henry IV.
But I thought that
interestingly,
would probably be the case. But
Henry IV was actually born Henry Bolingbroke.
Oh, yeah.
So he's known as Bolingbroke. So he wants to see Bolingbroke. And he wasn't the king. Okay. And he basically usurped the king to become the king.
Usurper.
So he wasn't in line to be the king.
Was he from Saxon lineage or Norman lineage, or do you not really know?
Norman, obviously.
Well,
yeah.
By that point, he was sort of getting...
So this is we're starting to get into the York-Lancaster thing.
Yeah,
here,
sure.
So I think Henry was, I'd say Lancaster if I had to say. So anyway, crowned king in 1413, and of course in 1415 we had one of the great triumphs of British history, English and Welsh history, I think more accurately, where a very tired and depleted English and Welsh force that was very much in retreat defeated a 5 times bigger French force with the cream of European knights, and we basically gave them one hell of a beating. Welsh archers very much to the fore. Unfortunately, Henry V didn't live very long. I think he was dead by 1421, but that's for another day. Interesting fact: this in 1516, the first ever Jewish ghetto was created in Venice.
In the ghetto.
So I watched a programme the other day about the sort of history of the Jewish race, right from sort of 500 BC up to now, which is quite interesting. And it's funny how they started to migrate. The Jews migrated into Europe, very successful as they are now, became the money lenders to the aristocracy and monarchy. And I think one of the things that's sad about people is very, very opposite of you and me, Callum, where we respect people. So if someone overtakes me on my bike, I think fair play.
Yeah, sure.
All I worry about is if I'm doing my best and someone's better than me, then I think great respect to you,
Yeah.
I think I don't like the politics of envy and all this.
No, I can't stand
So just 1516, can you believe that? The first ever ghetto. In 1710, very interesting one from my point of view as a businessman. In 1710, the first law regulating copyright was issued in Great Britain. So it's obviously quite an important subject. Copyright obviously applies to music as well. I think I'm right in saying that copyright only lasts 50 years, but if any listeners are listening to this and they know about these things, I'd like to know. I think there's a point where longevity...
I think that you can probably apply for it again, though, can't you, or something like that?
I don't think you can.
Do you not?
1783, hostilities officially ceased in the American Revolutionary War, or as would be called now, the American War of Independence. So, despite the fact that the Constitution was signed in 1776, so actually the war was still going on 7 years afterwards. Which again is not something that is understood or properly taught, actually. And of course,
was the White House burnt down after 76?
I think the White House was burnt down in 1812. In the second American War.
So a long time after then, by Canadian, British.
Yeah, there was another big war between Britain and America in 1812. I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think we got the better of that. That included, as Callum said, going up and burning down the White House. But of course, at the time, there were only 13 colonies.
Yeah, sure.
And some of the other colonies were still on our side, obviously, many of them. 1865... one of the great men in history, in my opinion, somebody I look up to, Robert E. Lee, who was the commander of the Confederacy.
General Lee.
Robert E. Lee and 26,765 troops surrendered in North Virginia. And that basically was the end of the American Civil War. which I've always sympathised with the Confederates, and that's not meant in a racist way. It's just true.
You are a Duke of Hazzard.
1868, the shogunate was abolished in Japan.
Shogunate.
Whatever you think of Tom Cruise, the film, I think it's called Shogun.
The Last
isn't it?
Samurai.
The Last Samurai. Thank you, Callum. It's absolutely wonderful bit where they're being mown down by the machine guns. And,
Ooh, yeah.
It's based on a true story as well.
yeah, well, it is, because as I mentioned,
Even even the white guy that was adopted as a samurai.
the shogunate was abolished, so it was very interesting. 1896. I want to talk about this a bit more in a minute. Spyridon Lewis of Greece won the first Olympic marathon in 2 hours 58:50, and we were talking. So not that long afterwards, it got down to 2 hours 26. So something like in 20 years, the world record was reduced by half an hour.
Yeah,
which is quite something.
Staggering.
Even more startling is in the same year, USA's Thomas Burke won the 100 meters in 12.2 seconds, which is incredibly slow. It's something I want to talk about. So I'll come back to that in the second section. In 1898, Spain declared war on the USA. Again, that's not something that would be commonly known.
No.
So that's the end of the first part, and on to a wonderful song, one of my favourite songs, Number 9 Dream by John Lennon.
On This Week in History.
Hello, and welcome back to the second part of On This Week in History, week ending April the 11th. And I've always loved athletics, and especially measuring my own performance and how I do against other people, etc. So I thought it was interesting to do a bit of research. So I did some research into the Olympics. So I was amazed that Thomas Burke won the 100 metres in 12.2 seconds. And to put that into perspective, I would have beaten him when I was 14.
Yeah. So what year did Thomas Burke win?
1896, the first Olympics. And then...
So in 1896 you could have won the Olympic medal.
Well, by miles. I'd have won
That's
by
so
10
funny,
metres.
That's mad, isn't it?
In 1896, I would have won by 10 metres at my best, over 10 metres. Anyway, and then in 1900, the world record was reduced to 11.4 seconds in the heats. But amazingly, it just goes to show, so I suppose because the record was soft, do you know what I mean? So you get soft records. And
Yeah.
I think because 12.2 was such a disappointing time, and of course in those days, I suspect that... it was quite elitist, so it didn't always follow that the fastest person would get to run.
I was going to say, I expect in those days it wasn't by any means like the fastest people. Actually
democratic,
racing.
yeah. But in the final, the guy won in 10.8, which is put that in perspective, would be as fast as any woman's ever run. So Flojo ran just a little bit slower than that.
Yeah.
I think 10.87 was the fastest. So put that in perspective. And then Chariots of Fire, Harold Abrahams, he won in 10.6. So to put that in perspective, Usain Bolt would have beaten Harold Abrahams by 8 metres. It's quite a long way, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then in 1932, only 8 years later, Eddie Tolands broke the world record in 10.4 seconds. And then Jesse Owens in the famous Berlin Olympics ran in 10.3, which is a serious time. And again, if you go back to, there's been eras where there's been fantastic running and then not so fantastic running. So when Alan Wells, for instance, of Scotland won the gold for us, he was, I think he might even won something like 10.2. So Jesse Owens would have given Alan Wells quite a good race,
Yeah, sure.
And of course, if Jesse Owens had been able to train today and eat the same thing, he probably would have, And again, just to put this into perspective, women in 1928, the first 100 metres was won in 12.2, which was the same time as the man's winning time in 1896. And by 1976, it had gone down to 11.01.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting that. So moving on to the proper facts in this section, 1900, the first modern submarine was designed and built by John Philip Holland. I absolutely hate submarines; they freak me out. There used to be a submarine that you could see on the way into Portsmouth whenever I drive past it, and it used to give me the bloody shivers. I'd never go down in a submarine if you paid me. 1909, Tel Aviv was established and was actually named as Tel Aviv in 1910. And again, contrary to sort of media distortion, bias, that's a good one, Callum. Until Tel Aviv, so there was actually nothing there. It was just scrubland.
Yeah.
Never been a building there, a city there or anything. So the Israelis effectively created a wonderful city out of nothing.
Flourishing city.
1912, RMS Titanic set sail from Southampton. Something it goes down in folklore, really. And my old office in Southampton was 100 yards from the plaque, so it was very important. I used to walk past the Titanic's thing all the time. 1916, something I didn't know. A ship called the Libau set sail from Germany with 20,000 rifles for the Irish Rebellion. That's an amazing fact. So the Germans sent a ship over to Ireland to give the Irish rebels 20,000 rifles to use against us. Quite a smart thing to do, really.
I'm not surprised, are you? Yeah.
1921, Iowa became the first state to impose a cigarette tax. So that's quite interesting. 1938, we have the Anschluss, Callum.
Anschluss.
Austria becomes a state of Germany. And then in 1941, Germany blitzes Coventry. So, again, don't stop me off on this. So you see a lot of things now about Germans complaining about excessive retaliation, I suppose you'd call it, from Bomber Command.
How can you have
I just sit there and think, well, you started it, Fritz,
Yeah.
If I'm allowed to say that. So it's unusual, Drew. We've actually got two songs before the next on This Week in History. So we got a great song, Govinda by Kula Shaker, and then one of my favourite dance albums, You're Not Alone and You're Never Alone With Us.
Bringing you the news of old on This Week in History with Paul Waite.
So we are bringing you the news of old, and this is the final section of On This Week in History today. Something that I'm fascinated by. In 1940, Vidkun Quisling formed the Norwegian national government. Because Quisling has probably gone down in history as maybe the greatest traitor of all time. Although, again, I've actually did a bit of research for today, which I don't always do with my facts. And it's quite interesting. Even he went to his grave protesting his innocence. It's actually quite an interesting man. Prior to him becoming notorious, he actually had quite an interesting career, and I think he felt that he did what he did. He did what he did for the best of his country. It's not really our place to. But anyway,
It's all in the eye of the beholder.
the legacy of that is obviously Quisling is now a term in the dictionary for basically embodied traitor. So that's what he is, the greatest traitor. Very sad fact, this. I'm very against the death penalty. Hugely against, actually. In my mind, if one innocent person hangs out of 1,000, that's one too many. I'm sorry, that's just the way I feel very strongly about it. Ruth Ellis was the last woman to be executed in the UK in 1955, and she was prosecuted for shooting her lover, David Blakely, who apparently, jilting lover, and I think there was a lot of controversy at the time. It's actually quite surprising the execution took place. I'm proud that 66 years have gone past, and hopefully there won't be any others. In 1957, Britain agreed to Singapore having home rule. Singapore, fabulous place, cleanest place I've ever been to in the world. And
they're very eco over there, aren't they?
Just amazingly organised, fabulously well-organised people. I mean, COVID has just not been an issue there because they've just got rid of it. If you take the things about, was it piss poor preparation makes for piss poor, whatever it is, execution. So what they've shown is their approach is like the complete opposite of the French, say, or meticulous planning. And they've I don't know if they've had 100 deaths. Absolutely crazy. 1963, an interesting one. I didn't know this. Winston Churchill became the first person to become an honorary USA citizen.
Well, his mum was American, wasn't she?
Yes. Yeah. Old Jenny.
Jenny Church.
1996. This is an interesting one. So have a guess on this, boys. The fastest wind speed ever recorded in Barrow Island, Australia. This is outside of like a cyclone or something,
I don't know, like 200 miles an hour?
Good. Wow. 253.
I was going to say 250. God.
Now, I got to say, as someone who cycles a lot, cycling in 14 is quite unpleasant.
I think the most it's been in my lifetime is like 85 and in Britain.
Yeah, that's about right. Really interesting fact, this. In 2019, the first ever photo of a black hole. I can believe this. 6.5 billion times the mass of Earth. It's just crazy, isn't it?
Big black
55 million light years away.
Yeah. It's just incomprehensible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just crazy. 2019, again, new species of human was discovered called Homo luzonensis.
When was this,
which
sorry?
was in 2019. Homo luzonensis, 3 feet tall.
Hobbits.
50,000 to 60,000 years ago, they reckon it was
Wow.
living. So, yeah, real hobbits. And the final fact to leave you with today was just really interesting. Again, I read about this because I was so interested by it. 4 tiny sweat bees were removed from a woman's eye in the world's first operation in Taiwan. And actually what happened is this lady was gardening, bent down, and she actually thought all that happened is that dust went into her eye. She had her eye open, and these 4 tiny bees flew into her eye and actually went in. Fortunately, amazing forethought, this woman didn't rub her eye. Wow. So although her eye was itching, she had the presence of mind not to rub it, because of course that would have made her blind probably.
Really?
So she went to hospital complaining of an itchy eye or whatever, and the surgeon saw a leg sticking out from her eye, and actually managed to remove the sweat bees, and none of them were killed.
Wow.
So there we are.
Wow.
I removed a midge from my eye once.
So there's some interesting facts there. I hope you enjoyed that, people. Next, again, one of my favourite dance anthems. Again, a bit of one of the songs I love to listen to in the gym. And then one of the greatest videos of all time, Black Hole Sun and Soundgarden.
Aspen Waite Radio Podcasts. Download at aspenwaiteradio.com or subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Podcasts.